to the future, we need to continue to develop that science. For example, if we had more sensors in the Pacific Ocean, we could get better data and understand what is actually coming from the west to the east, or from the east to the west, depending on what part of the Pacific Ocean you're in. Like, if we get more data, the forecasts are going to get better.
Okay, but even if we get more sensors in the Pacific Ocean, and even if we get better forecasts and better warnings on these more quickly intensifying storms, that doesn't solve the problem of helping people on land to prepare when, by definition, they just have less and less time given the warming water. So how are we supposed to solve for that? I mean, the straightforward answer would seem to be we need to cut back on emissions, which is clearly a root cause of these warming temperatures, creating these nightmare scenarios. But even if we did that, that would take time. So what do we do now? If you live in a coastal community and you're getting less and less time to prepare for a hurricane, what can be done?
A lot of it ends up coming down to mitigation. It comes down to as simple as building materials, right? Like, there are things called hurricane ties that you can get for a few bucks to hold down your roof to the rest of the framework of your house so the roof doesn't blow off. There are things that can be done to help mitigate that disaster. Another thing is, not building in floodplains, where we're seeing a lot more of that. But then it's also having shelters readily available that are hurricane proof or tornado proof. Like, there are things that cities and towns and countries can do to help mitigate the disaster by giving people options if they're in the path of a major storm.
Right. Options that increasingly perhaps need to acknowledge that there might not be time to get in your car and drive for hours and hours, but are contingency plans that perhaps recognize that you may end up needing to stay in your community when one of these storms very rapidly becomes something super dangerous.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, just thinking about the fact that you are a meteorologist, if this situation we're describing makes you feel an immense amount of pressure to get things righter than ever before. There's always lots of carping when a meteorologist gets something wrong. You told us to worry about a storm, it passed us, we're annoyed with you. But the burden now feels even more intense, because if you're wrong, the amount of time, the room for error, is vanishingly small. And the danger is so much greater, and that puts you in a very tricky position.
Yeah, I mean, meteorologists have always gotten it wrong. That's why it's a joke, because it's a science. Meteorologists, what they're doing is creating a hypothesis. So when they're forecasting, when a meteorologist like myself is giving you a forecast, they're giving their best educated guess based off of everything that's happening around. So as I write these stories and am trying to forecast these bigger storms, being right is not easy. I feel responsible for what people may think by reading those words. Like, should they evacuate? Should they not evacuate? Is this storm actually going to be a big deal? And I carry a lot of that weight on my shoulders. And in this world where storms can intensify and kind of come out of nowhere, it's not the kind of storm I like to wake up to the next morning and go, oh, I should have covered this 2 days ago so people had more warning.
Right.
I want to be able to warn people 3 or 4 days in advance of a major hurricane. And when they rapidly intensify next to a city with nearly 1 million people, that is the worst nightmare.
Well, Judson, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
We'll be right back.
This podcast is supported by Pain Hustlers, a new Netflix film inspired by an outrageous true story, as well as a New York Times article and book penned by journalist Evan Hughes. From BAFTA-winning director David Yates comes the tale of a scrappy single mother fighting to secure a better life for her daughter. Pain Hustlers, now playing only on Netflix. Rated R.
Here's what else you need to know today. A massive manhunt entered its second day in Maine, where police were searching for the gunman who killed at least 18 people at a restaurant and bowling alley in America's deadliest shooting of the year. Police described the suspect as a sergeant first class in the Army Reserve, where his superiors became alarmed over statements he had made over the summer, threatening his own unit.
All Maine people are sharing in the sorrow of the families who lost loved ones last night. Loved ones, normal people who were killed or injured while unwinding from the day of work or while spending time with their family and friends, socializing.
During a news conference, Maine's Governor, Janet Mills, called the shooting a dark day for the state and for the city where it occurred.
I know that the people of Lewiston are enduring immeasurable pain. I wish I could take that pain off your hearts, off your shoulders, but I promise you this, we will all help you carry that grief.
And on Thursday, the Israeli military said it had briefly sent tanks into northern Gaza in preparation for its next stage of fighting, which could involve a ground invasion. In Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry said that the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli airstrikes has surpassed 7,000 people. But those numbers cannot be independently verified and have been questioned by President Biden. In response, Hamas released what it said were the names of 6,747 people who had died. Today's episode was produced by Olivia Nat, Eric Krupke, Claire Tennisketter, and Lindsay Garrison. It was edited by Devin Taylor and Liz O'Balin. Fact-checked by Susan Lee. Contains original music by Marian Lozano, Alicia Itube, and Pat McCusker, and was engineered by Chris Wood. Our theme music is by Jim Runberg and Ben Landsberg of Wonderley. The Daily is made by Rachel Quester, Lindsay Garrison, Claire Tennisketter, Paige Cowan, Michael Simon Johnson, Brad Fisher, Chris Wood, Jessica Chung, Stella Tan, Alexandra Lee Young, Lisa Chow, Eric Krupke, Mark George, Luke Vanderkluke, MJ Davis-Lynn, Dan Powell, Sydney Harper, Michael Benoit, Liz O'Balin, Asta Chaturvedi, Rochelle Banja, Diana Wynn, Marian Lozano, Corey Schreppel, Rob Zipko, Alicia Itu, Mooj Sadie, Patricia Willens, Rowan Nemisto, Jody Becker, Ricky Novetsky, John Ketchum, Nina Feldman, Will Reed, Carlos Prieto, Ben Calhoun, Susan Lee, Lexi Diao, Mary Wilson, Alex Stern, Dan Farrell, Sophia Landman, Shannon Lin, Diane Wong, Devin Taylor, Alyssa Moxley, Summer Tamad, Olivia Nat, Daniel Ramirez, and Brendan Klinkenberg. Special thanks to Lisa Tobin, Sam Dolnick, Paula Schumann, Larissa Anderson, Julia Simon, Sophia Milan, Mahima Chablani, Elizabeth Davis Moore, Jeffrey Miranda, Renan Borelli, Maddie Masiello, Isabella Anderson, and Nina Lassa. That's it for the Daily. I'm Michael Bavaro. See you on Monday.
This podcast is supported by Pain Hustlers, now playing only on Netflix.
Caitlin, I honestly
say this, I don't know where to start.
It's hard to see you in a last words. That's usually my thing.
Today was the day we've all been waiting for. Sam Bankman-Fried, after much anticipation, he took the stand, and wow, how would you describe it?
It was wild. Bankman-Fried took the stand today, and he was questioned by his defense attorneys and the prosecution, and the mood in the courtroom was one of tense excitement. Like, everyone has been waiting for this moment. And from the moment that the trial started, it's been an ongoing question whether Bankman-Fried would actually testify.
Yes, it definitely has been. And that anticipation really goes way back, I would say, to before this trial started, because it's been nearly a year since FTX collapsed, and almost a year since Bankman-Fried went on a media tour where he explained his side of the story. But now he's telling his side of the story under oath. Very different circumstances.
Yes, and today was the first time we also saw him be cross-examined by the government.
Yeah, I think we need to go back to the studio and talk more about what happened in court today.
Yeah, buckle up. From the Journal, this is the trial of Crypto's Golden Boy. I'm Caitlin Ostroff.
And I'm Rachel Humphreys.
Coming up, Sam Bankman-Fried takes the stand.
This episode is brought to you by Canva. Brands need to keep their visuals consistent no matter what size the company is. Canva makes that easy to do. You can create a Canva brand kit to keep all your logos, colors, fonts, icons, and more in one place. Or set up brand templates for the team and take the guesswork out of staying on brand. It's the perfect tool for experts and non-experts. Start designing today at canva.com, the home for every brand.
So I'm going to get to the point, Caitlin, because we've been up for a very long time today. We got up extremely early to line up outside the courthouse because we wanted to get into the courtroom today to see Sam Bankman-Fried testify. Now, there are only 21 seats for the public in the courtroom, and we did manage to snag 2, although it was competitive.
Yeah, I think the last kind of slots were billed by 4:30 a.m. this morning. And everyone was really excited again because it's the day that Bankman-Fried took the stand. But we actually didn't get Bankman-Fried until the afternoon. And the morning was pretty uneventful, except for the fact that we lost a juror. One of the jurors showed up sick, he'd been vomiting, and Judge Kaplan was like, I can't risk you infecting the rest of the courtroom. He really wanted to stay on the trial too.
Wanted to stay.
Must have been very upsetting for him, but Kaplan said, I can't risk it. But this is why we have 5 remaining alternates.
Yeah, sorry to that juror who's not only sick but also wanted to be part of this trial. But yeah, he is gone. And after that uneventful morning where we had thought that Bankman-Fried might take the stand, and then we went to lunch and we were promised that he would, and for weeks he's been watching his former colleagues like Caroline Ellison, Nishad Singh and Gary Wong testify, and today it was his turn.
And it was packed. Every seat and all of the benches were taken up. His parents were there as usual. Judge Kaplan's wife was present, and the mother of one of the main government prosecutors, Danielle Sassoon, was also sitting in the court.
Yeah, it's a family affair some days at court, and in the room you could feel the tension, like it was a little bit fizzy, and so we were all expecting this was going to be the big moment. But then something unexpected happened, and the judge told the jury that they could go home.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I was starting to wonder / panic if we weren't actually going to hear from Bankman-Fried at all.
We suddenly thought, the long wait in the line this morning wasn't worth it.
The heart started racing a little bit. But before Bankman-Fried could testify in front of a jury, there was an issue that the court had to resolve, and that was that Bankman-Fried's defense team wants him to testify in part about advice that lawyers at FTX gave to Bankman-Fried. And the government doesn't want that to be heard in court. And so the judge basically said, before I decide whether I'm going to allow this testimony to happen in front of a jury, we're going to kind of do a dry run. And we're going to see what happens. And if it doesn't go our way, then we're going to have to go to trial. And so the judge basically said, before I decide whether I'm going to allow this testimony to happen in front of a jury, we're going to kind of do a dry run. And we're going to see what happens. and you're gonna do that and the cross-examination, but without a jury.
Yeah, so what we watched this afternoon, Caitlin, was a dress rehearsal, and Bankman-Fried walked in, and instead of taking his usual chair in between his lawyers, he went up onto the witness stand.
Yeah, and he sat there, and I mean, we were in the back granted, but he looked quite small. He was staring out at the courtroom wearing this dark suit and a lilac tie, and this is the big, huge courtroom on the 26th floor of the federal courthouse.
And we got started with the defense questioning Bankman-Fried. Now, we sat in court for weeks hearing witnesses testify that Bankman-Fried directed them to commit fraud, and today we got to hear his rebuttal to that, didn't we?
Yeah, and basically Bankman-Fried put a lot of blame on his lawyers and company policies that they helped create at FTX. And he talked about, not being the CEO of Alameda Research, the trading firm he founded. He was CEO for a while, but he stepped down in 2021. And he said that, because of that, he wasn't aware of big decisions that happened.
Yeah, and let's talk about FTX's lawyers for a moment, because the name that Bankman-Fried mentioned a lot today was Dan Friedberg. Now, remind us, who is he?
Yeah, Dan Friedberg was the former chief regulatory officer at FTX, and he was a lawyer within the company. He had previously worked for a law firm called Fenwick & West. And Bankman-Fried testified that Friedberg set up the bank account that routed FTX customer deposits to Alameda Research.
Yeah, and we should just say a lawyer for Friedberg declined to comment, and a spokesperson for Fenwick & West didn't respond to a request for comment.
Bankman-Fried also testified that FTX's attorneys were involved in approving loans from Alameda Research to Bankman-Fried and other FTX executives. And he also said that some of those loans were used to make investments.
Yeah, and his lawyer, Mark Cohen, at one point asked if Bankman-Fried took comfort in the fact that his lawyers structured those loans, and Bankman-Fried said, quote, "Yeah, of course." So overall, the defense questioned Bankman-Fried for over an hour this afternoon, and it went pretty well for him. I thought he was calm and coherent.
Honestly, we've heard Bankman-Fried speak a lot before, and I thought this was actually a new side to Bankman-Fried that we were seeing. He, came across, as you said, calm and coherent, and he seemed very poised. And then came the prosecution and the cross-examination of him, and we're going to talk about all of that after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Empower. If you're like most people, you've had your fair share of financial questions. Questions like, will you be able to afford a third kid? Will you be able to do everything you want when you retire? What if you outlive your savings? Empower knows these questions can be stressful, so they're here to help answer your what ifs and empower what's next. Join 18 million Americans and take control of your finances.
Man, that was a nice little wedding. Tommy and Shelby Kramer just married. Oh man. 10:30 at night. 70 degrees right now. We're out here at Lake, I think it's called Lake Lindsay. They got like 3 different venues for events. I think mostly people have weddings out here. They got some nice man-made lakes, lots of parking, a nice spot. Right now we're driving through New Miami. It's a village just north of Hamilton. Home sweet home.